Can you hear me? Get in real close, right there. Okay. Good evening, brothers and sisters. For those of you who do not know me, I am Franklin Adams. I am the first counselor in the stake presidency for the Yucaipa, California stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Welcome to all of you who are members of the church and those who are visiting with us today. President Kartosian, the president of the stake, would love to be here tonight, but he's on vacation for 2 weeks, so you're stuck with me. For those of you who do know me, we will not be asking you to move closer this evening. The 24th of July is a very special event and time in the church for the history that we celebrate in the saints coming to the Salt Lake Valley, as you will learn more tonight. This is a wonderful presentation that's been put together by the Cultural Arts Committee of the Yucaipa stake. We thank them so very much for their many hours of preparation and diligence in putting this together, as well as all those who have volunteered their time to come and participate as actors, cast members, and those who have prepared the sets and done all the support. There's been a tremendous amount of time and effort put into this to make a very quality presentation. We thank all of them for their efforts. We will begin this evening with a word of prayer by Brother Gary Freestone. Brother Freestone.
Our Heavenly Father, we are grateful to be together tonight for this activity, for this production. We're grateful, Father in heaven, for the blessings of the gospel that bring us together. We're grateful, Father, for the great sacrifice of thy beloved Son and all he has done for us. We pray that thou will bless us, that we will be mindful of the things that he did, that we might repent of our sins and do all that we can to be worthy to return today. We pray, Father, that thou will bless us tonight to have thy Spirit to be with us. We're grateful, Father, for those pioneers of the past and that have established the church in these latter days. We're grateful, Father, for their efforts and for their great sacrifices. We pray that we'll be able to honor them tonight in a proper manner, Father, that thy Spirit will attend us. And these things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
After the church was organized in 1830, the prophet Joseph Smith sent out missionaries to find the pure in heart. Those families and individuals who joined the church heeded the call to Zion and traveled long distances together with the saints in America. On August 6, 1842, in Nauvoo, Illinois, Joseph Smith prophesied that the saints would be driven to the Rocky Mountains located outside the borders of the United States at that time. He saw the snow-capped mountains and the cool streams, the extreme weather conditions, the cold, the snow, the rain, and the mud. He must have known that the trek west would be hard, and it was. On February 4th, 1846, that prophecy was fulfilled when Brigham Young, the 12 apostles, and a company of some 2,000 saints left Nauvoo. It was the start of some 15,000 pioneers who traveled west to seek a new home in the wilderness. When Brigham Young reached the Great Salt Lake Valley on July 24th, 1847, he declared, "This is the place." Tonight, the Rawls family has invited us to join their family home evening about the Mormon pioneers. Many of the descendants of those early pioneers are among us tonight, and some of them are among our storytellers. They will share stories from actual historical accounts, personal journals, and family histories of Mormon pioneers from 1846 to 1857. So let's join the Rawls family this evening and begin our journey of the pioneers west.
Okay, everyone, it's time for Family Home Evening.
Let's listen carefully to our topic tonight. I made your favorite treats and desserts for when we're done.
Oh, Dad, do we have to do another lesson?
Amber, I think you're going to like our subject tonight. Would you say the opening prayer?
Okay. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Please bless, we'll help be safe, and we thank you for letting us become a family in Jesus Christ's name.
Amen. Tonight we're going to hear some stories of the Mormon pioneers who answered the call to Zion. Michelle, do you have our costumes?
Yes, here they are.
Good. These will help us be in the pioneer spirit. Whether people have ancestors who crossed the plains or not, we all have pioneers in our families. Some of the pioneers were not members of our church. Sometimes we are the pioneers in our families.
Do we have any pioneers in our family?
We might. Would you like to do some research as a family to find them?
Yes.
Okay, so let's begin by singing hymn number 30, Come, Come Ye Saints. Come, come ye saints.
Do I remember? I wonder who wrote that pioneer hymn. Do you guys remember who wrote it?
No? Who?
It was William Clayton. He wrote it on the Pioneer Trail. This is the story that Franklin D. Richards told in the October 1982 General Conference. President Brigham Young, feeling great anxiety over the murmurings in the camp, called Elder William Clayton aside and said, "Brother Clayton, I want you to write a hymn that the people can sing at their campfires in the evening. Something that will give them succor and support and help them to forget the many troubles and trials of the journey." Elder Clayton withdrew from the camp and in 2 hours returned with the hymn he called All Is Well, which we know today as Come, Come Ye Saints. His personal testimony is that it was written under the power and inspiration of the Lord. This is a hymn that brought the pioneers great courage and comfort and became a favorite hymn of the saints. Let's sing it. Come, come, ye saints, no toil nor labor fear, but with joy wend your way. Though hard to you this journey may appear, great shall be as your day. 'Tis better far.
I love that hymn.
Well, what made you decide to go west with the Saints, Matthew?
Well, I'll tell you. My name is Matthew Caldwell. I was born in 1822 in Illinois. In 1828, my family moved to Hancock County, Illinois, a wild wooded place with an abundance of wild game. It was also the home of the wily Sacs and Fox Indians, but we were farmers. In the winter of 1838 and 1839, some members of the Mormon Church settled in Hancock County near my home. I became acquainted with a good many of them, including the daughter of our neighbor, Miss Barzilla Guyman, whom I married in 1843. In the same year, my home was threatened by a mob. But after I got my gun and told them I would shoot the first one that set fire to anything on my place, well, they turned and rode away. I remained in Hancock County until the Mormon people were driven out. Then I sold my property to go with them, but had told no one of my intentions. The first time I met Brigham Young was near my home. At that time, I helped him select a considerable amount of land, which he bought for the Saints. The next time I saw Brigham Young was in the winter of 1846 in Nauvoo. He traded me a horse for a wagon. And then Mr. Young asked me, "Mr. Caldwell, do you belong to the Mormon Church?" I answered, "No, I never did." "Well," he said, "I will give you some advice. My counsel is for you to wind up your affairs and go west. We would like to have all such boys as you go with us." I responded, "Well, that is curious counsel indeed. Trade a man out of his wagon and then advise him to move." President Young continued, "If you will go, I will give you the wagon back." "Thank you," I said. "If I go, I can go on my own hook." At the same time, I was intending to go, but I didn't tell him. I got ready as soon as I could, crossed the Mississippi River, and went as far as Mount Pisgah, where I met Mr. Young again. As soon as he saw me, he sent Mr. Ezra T. Benson to my home with a request that I accept an invitation to go down to the river and be baptized. I tried to think of some excuse not to be baptized, but, well, I couldn't. So I accepted. And on the 17th of June, 1846, I was baptized by Apostle Ezra T. Benson in the Grand River. President Young then asked me to join the Mormon Battalion. Well, I was worried about my family, but he promised me that my family would be in better condition than when I left them. With that promise, I went and found his words fulfilled to the letter when I returned to my family. I was well acquainted with President Young from that time until his death and never did find one word of his predictions ever to fail. Say, Dorothy, why don't you tell us your story?
My name is Dorothy Melissa Allen Humphreys, the youngest child of James Dickerson Allen and Sarah Ann Hardy Allen. I was such a tiny baby at birth. The family nicknamed me Dolly, a name that I was called throughout my lifetime. Even my friends and children did not know my real name. I was only 5 years old when I came across the plains with my large family of brothers and sisters. My family, the Allen family, was assigned to Captain Stewart's Company of 50, which crossed the plains in 1852. When we were about to leave our home in Green Plains, Illinois, some 15 miles from Carthage Jail, to join the Great Migration West, a mob appeared in our property to burn the house and destroy anything we could take with us. Just then, a citizen walked among us with his hand on his pistol, saying in a loud voice, "I will put daylight through the first man that fires a steak or shoots a hog. This is my property. I bought it and paid for it with my money." We left, and as soon as we left, the mob set the house on fire. That evening, our family and some of our friends stood on the west side of the Mississippi River, watching the fires burn our once happy homes where they had been standing. With sadness and heavy hearts, we witnessed this outrageous spectacle. One evening, years earlier, my father, James Allen, had come into the house with excitement in his voice and said, "Come out here and see these funny clouds." My mother, Sarah Ann, and the older children hurried into the yard to see some of them, and some of them were sent to tell the neighbors to look out and see the wonderful spectacle in the heavens. Clouds rose in the east, and they were in the form of men dressed in uniform, carrying knapsacks on their backs with guns on their shoulders. Some soldiers were tall, some were short. There were bayonets fixed on their rifles. These armies marched two and two all night long and into the daylight. They gathered in the west and formed what is known in war as a hollow square. There they turned red as blood and gradually disappeared. Many people in the area witnessed this apparition. The saints interpreted this phenomenon to mean the armies of heaven would fight the battles of the saints in the west, and it was given them that they might take heart and carry on to make the bold venture into the west. For some 3 weeks following the incident, there appeared in the west at sunset a drawn sword shining bright that set with the evening star, another sign of safety in the west. Brother Miskin, do you want to share a pioneer poem?
I look to thee, city beautiful, beyond the river lost. Lost now my home there, wrought in aching toil, where tiny bone of my bone rests beneath the prairie sod. That life is past, my face is west, and my heart will follow because I know his voice. It is the captain of my soul who calls me to go on, and my hand is with his hand and all the chosen of the Lord. O Joseph, what did you see on our horizon? O Brigham, what do you know of sorrow yet to come? I leave thee, city, without an answer, for my soul is settled. In camp I echo all is well, and I move on to journey, to labor, and plant. For years or for a life, my steel is forged, the fire can only temper more. But the journey and the years ne'er will dim my view of the temple on the hill, and hand to plow, I sow the hope that toil and time will bring Nauvoo to live again, that our all is well will sound once more someday in thee, someday in Nauvoo. Sister Smith, you're the widow of Hiram, the brother of the prophet. Can you tell us about the miraculous recovery of your oxen on the plains?
Sure, I'd be glad to. As you know, if you've heard, my name is Mary Fielding Smith. I'm the widow of the late Hiram Smith. I was born Mary Fielding on July 21st, 1801, in Bedfordshire, England. I lived in England until 1834 when I emigrated to Toronto, Canada, to join my brother John and my sister Mercy, who'd moved there 2 years earlier. In May of 1836, all three of us were baptized into the Latter-day Saint religion. And the following year, I moved to Kirtland, Ohio, to join the larger body of the saints. In December 1837, I married Hiram Smith. After my husband, Hiram, and his brother, the prophet Joseph Smith, were murdered by the mob in Carthage jail, persecutions continued in Nauvoo. The saints were being driven out of Nauvoo. So in the fall of 1846, I decided to take my family and follow Brigham Young and the 12 apostles to the Salt Lake Valley. It seemed nearly impossible to make the trek with no husband, a large family, and others in my care. But I was determined to make the journey, and I trusted in the Lord. It was very hard traveling with 7 wagons, 4 teams of oxen, and several heads of cattle. And along the trail, we had several mishaps, one of which was of considerable concern to myself and my family. I remember one day we were traveling through the hot sand and dirt. It was an extremely hot day. When all of a sudden, one of my best oxen, well, he just stopped. He laid down, he rolled over, and stiffened out his legs as if he was in the throes of death. Well, of course, all the wagons behind us stopped, and some of the people came running forward to see what was happening. Well, the word got out to the captain in the advance company, and he came out to see what was going on. I mean, no one thought this ox would recover. Well, when the captain got off his horse and he knelt down, he examined my ox. And then he said, he's dead. There's no sense in working with this animal. We'll have to find some way to take the widow Smith along. Well, in the meantime, during the commotion, I'd been searching the wagons for some consecrated oil, and I now came forward with it. And after I heard what the captain said, I gathered up all the faith that I had, and I knelt down beside that animal, and I pleaded with him to get up. I told him we were depending on him to get us to the Salt Lake Valley. Well, I then asked one of the brethren to give him a blessing, hoping and praying that the Lord would raise him up. And so the brethren poured the oil on the animal's head, and he laid hands upon him and gave him a blessing. Well, as soon as he got up, well, that ox just opened up his eyes. He gathered up his legs. He stood up, and, well, he moved ahead as well as ever. I can only imagine this further exasperated that old captain, since he pronounced that animal dead. Well, my prayers were answered, and we were able to move on. I gave grateful thanks unto the Lord for his mercies. Agnes, tell us about the experience you and Mary had with the snakes.
Let's see, where to begin that old story. My name is Agnes Caldwell, and I was born in 1847 in Glasgow, Scotland. My very best friend was Mary Huron, whom I met in the handcart company. My parents were William and Margaret Ann McFall Caldwell, who joined the Willie Handcart Company in 1856. During our journey west, it was a favorite game for Mary and I to walk ahead of the handcarts and run and play while the others caught up. Oh, we had such good times together. As we skipped and played, I shouted, "Make way for the Queen of England! Make way for the Queen of England!" over and over, and would throw flowers from my bonnet. After a few minutes, I shouted to Mary, "My flowers are all gone. Let me share some of yours." And she gave me some of hers. But that day, us being alone was not for the best. We were playing and having fun when suddenly we heard a rattling sound and saw a rattlesnake in the dirt. It was coiled up and looked as if it was ready to strike. We saw it and were terrified. We looked around and saw that more snakes were coming out from the bushes everywhere around us. Mary said to me, "Hurry and say a prayer." We stood perfectly still. I said the prayer, and we both said amen. Mary whispered something to me. I asked, "Why are you whispering to me?" Mary replied, "Because I don't want the snakes to hear our plan." She then took me by the hand, and Mary said, "Ready? Go!" We felt impressed to move forward right through those snakes. It seemed to me as if we were jumping for more than a mile. Due to the protective hand of the Lord, we managed to escape, and we were not harmed by the snakes. I am so glad that we were quick to obey the promptings of the Spirit. In fact, there's a song we used to sing. Pioneer children were quick to obey.
Would you like to hear my story now?
Yeah.
My name is Hannah Edith Johnson. I was 12 years old when my family started out for the Salt Lake Valley in Brigham Young's company in 1846. My mother, Phoebe, and Brigham Young's wife, Mary Ann, were sisters. Day after day, as I walked across the plains, my feet bled and were terribly sore. One morning, I left camp early, thinking I would get far enough ahead of the wagons so that I could take time to rest my feet while the wagons caught up. After a few miles of walking, I stepped off the trail and laid down on a rock in the tall grass and soon fell asleep. I slept so soundly that I didn't hear the wagons pass. I heard that after arriving in camp that evening, my parents searched for me among the company members, thinking that I had spent the day with my friends, but found that no one had seen me. Brigham Young sent a rescue party back over the trail to search for me. They told me that the rescue party discovered where I had laid down to sleep and noticed moccasin and unshod pony prints all around the rock where I had rested earlier that day. The rescuers galloped their horses back to the camp and informed Brigham Young that I had been taken by Indians. The men gathered their rifles and weapons and began to devise a plan for intercepting the Indian party. However, Brigham Young told the men not to go, that such a venture would result in bloodshed. President Young then told the men that if they waited until midnight, the Lord would direct them to the Indian camp and would deliver me to them. Following President Young's counsel, the rescue party set out under full moon, following the Indian pony tracks. As they came upon the Indian camp, I heard their horses and listened carefully as I was still frightened by being captured. The men snuck into the Indian camp, and as soon as they were near, I could see that they were from the handcart company. So I started to whimper so they could find me. I was lying on a blanket between two Indian braves. The men crawled to where I was, grabbed me by the blanket, and slowly pulled me out from between the two sleeping Indians. Crawling away from the camp, one of them put me on his horse, and the rescuers rode back to the company. As soon as we reached the company, I ran into the arms of my mother. She was so grateful to have me back safe and unharmed. However, the angry Indians returned to the pioneer camp the next day and threatened harm to the pioneers if they did not give their little white squaw back to them. Of course, the captain refused. The camp was on high alert for 3 days. The Indians followed and threatened the camp. During those long 3 days, I hid in a wooden box in the back of the wagon. Finally, Brigham Young appeased the war party by providing the Indians with food from the company's scanty ration store. President Young, will you tell us about the call to the Mormon Battalion?
I remember one day, Captain James Allen of the United States Army came into camp with an important message from President Polk. I gathered the company together and introduced him. Brethren, this is Captain James Allen of the United States Army, sent here by President Polk. Captain Allen has an important proposal to make. Good afternoon. It has been suggested by President Polk's cabinet that many Mormons would willingly enter the service of the U.S. and aid our expedition to California. We need 5 companies of 100 men each to muster into the Army of the West. Step forward, men. Come, join our cause. No one stepped forward. He continued, you would be given military pay, your weapons will be provided, and you can keep them. There's money for uniforms. Your uniform allotment can be given to your families, and you can wear what you have. I then informed the brethren that if we accepted this call, we would be able to go west at the expense of the United States government, and volunteering for the service would show our loyalty to the United States. In addition, these funds can purchase wagons, teams, and other necessities for our families to go west. Captain Allen again asked those who are willing to volunteer, step forward. But no one stepped forward. I addressed the brethren again, saying, President Polk wants us to do good and secure our confidence. This is evidence of our loyalty to the United States. It is our patriotic duty. The outfit of 500 men costs us nothing. Your pay will be sufficient to take your families over the mountains. This thing is from above and for our own good. The men did not see how they could possibly join the Army at this time because they didn't have anything to leave their families. They were very concerned for their welfare crossing the plains. I then made them this promise. I will tell you in the name of the Lord, If you will go, you shall have health and strength to perform the trip. You shall not have occasion to fire a gun at the enemy, and you shall not be shot at. You shall return to find your family in better condition than when you left them. Step forward, brethren. Then several brethren replied, with that promise, I will go. When they returned, my words were fulfilled to the letter. That evening, we had a farewell dance.
All right, folks, let's gather around. We're going to send our men off right tonight. Let's clear the ground so there's room for us to dance and have some fun. Perfect. Okay, groups of four. Groups of four. And all join hands. All right, strike up the fiddles. Let's dance. And circle left. Circle right. Right hand star. Left hand star. Do-si-do. Swing your partner. Meet and bow. And pass on the right. New group, let's go. Circle left. And circle right. Right hand star. Left hand star. Do-si-do. Swing your partner. Meet and bow. Pass on the right. New group, or circle. To the left. Now to the right. Right hand star. Left hand star. Do-si-do. Swing your partner. Meet and bow. Pass on through. Go to your new group. Circle left. Circle right. Right hand star. Left hand star. Do-si-do. Swing your partner. Meet and bow. Say goodbye to your neighbor. Pass on through the right hand side. Meet the new ones. Let's go. Left. Left. And right. Right hand star. Left hand star. Do-si-do. Swing your partner. Meet and bow. Pass on through.
Now you have to admit that was fun. Catherine, could you tell us about your experience with the Indians?
Hello, I'm Catherine Fay. I was born in 1827 in Ireland. As a young woman, not yet married, I worked hard, earning money and caring for my younger sister and brother in Manchester, England. Our father believed that Christ's true church existed somewhere on earth and encouraged us to find it. While living in England, the LDS missionaries taught the three of us Fay children, and we were baptized in 1848. Sadly, my brother died as a missionary in England in 1853. 6 months later, my sister Jane bid me farewell and left for America to join the saints in Zion. My heart's desire was to join my sister and the church members gathered in Utah. I would find out later that my sister made it to the valley, married, and died in childbirth before I could join her. It was in April of 1859 that I sailed from Liverpool, England to New York, then traveled by train and steamboat to Florence, Nebraska, known as winter quarters. Here, church authorities furnished immigrants with handcarts, necessary supplies, and instructions for travel. Each handcart carried 80 pounds of luggage. I had my share of food, bedding, and 17 pounds of personal belongings. I was happy to finally be on my way. I traveled without family or kin, but I was not lonely, for I became attached to my brothers and sisters in the gospel with a true bond of friendship. I waded through rivers and streams that were deeper than my boots. Eventually, my boots wore out, and Captain George Rowley wanted me to ride in one of the supply wagons. He was concerned about me, but I declined. My bleeding feet left tracks along the way until a friend gave me a pair of shoes that she had been saving to wear when she got to the Salt Lake Valley. One day, we saw some friendly Indians coming our way. They had killed a large buffalo that they brought to share with the pioneers. I had eaten my lunch and was tidying up a bit when the two strong Indians walked over to my handcart. At the time, I was rubbing a little hand cream on my face. It was the only luxury I had brought with me from England. The Indians whispered to each other, pointing to the cart and the things they saw in it. At first I was a little bit afraid, but my spirit was calmed when I saw the expression on their faces, and I knew they were curious and kind. They watched me apply the cream on my hands with so much interest that I offered them the jar and motioned for them to try it on their hands. They did so, smelled its delicate perfume, and smiled. They showed their hands to each other with the glee of children. The company began to break camp to move on. To my surprise, the Indians motioned to me to get into the handcart and they would pull it. I was concerned that they might run away with me in the handcart. I gave it a moment's thought, then motioned with my hands that they could pull the cart, but I would walk. They pulled my cart for several miles before they went on their way. Marn, tell us about your daughter, Annie.
My name is Marn Hansen Peterson. My husband Ole and I were converts who immigrated from Denmark with our 3 children, Peter, Soren, and Annie. We were the parents of 6 children, but 3 of them had died by the time we left our home country. After reaching a port in America, we traveled by train, arriving at the end of the line in Iowa City, Iowa. We joined the Captain James Parks Company of 68 handcarts. We'd brought enough wood that we could build a handcart, and thus we immediately set to work building and preparing for the trek west. 3 days after joining the Saints, our company began the journey. Along the trail, we had numerous breakdowns and were constantly repairing the handcarts. It was so difficult traveling through the harsh terrain and bad weather. Unexpectedly, we faced the ultimate heartbreak. Our son Soren became very ill and died. Our hearts sorrowed greatly as we buried him by the trail side. He was now the fourth of our 6 children to die terribly, but we had to move on. The trek west continued to be extremely trying. Like most of the other saints, we had to deal with all sorts of ailments and had to use buffalo chips for wood because it was hard to find. Oftentimes the dust was so bad that we had trouble breathing. As we traveled along through Indian Territory, little Annie, barely 18 months old, became very ill. We fervently prayed for the Lord to preserve her. As I held her in my arms, I realized that I could no longer feel life in her anymore. When the captain pronounced her dead, I cried out, "No!" I asked if something could be done. She was our 5th child to die, and the heartache was too much to bear. We wrapped her in a blanket and placed her under a bush right up against the trunk of a tree. Rocks were stacked all over and around so she would not be disturbed. Again, we had to move on and prayed to accept the will of the Lord. I felt impressed to go back to Annie's grave. I removed the bush and the rocks and took my Annie from the grave. I walked back to camp with my little Annie in my arms. When I reached camp, I saw Oli and I cried, "Oli, Oli, our Annie is not dead." He opened the blanket and felt Annie move. We prayed and thanked the Lord for saving our little Annie. It was truly a miracle from the Lord.
Blessed, oh blessed, the day of our Lord. Blessed the dead who rise at his word. Blessed the angels who swing wide the door. Blessed the time when I hold you once more. Blessed the time when I hold you once more.
President Young, tell us about the time you spoke at General Conference, calling the brethren to rescue the handcart companies, nearly buried in the snow on the trail.
It was at the October General Conference in Salt Lake City that I spoke these words. Many of our brothers and sisters are out on the plains, and many are possibly 400 to 700 miles from this place. We must get them and bring them in before the winter sets in. They would be apt to perish or suffer greatly if we do not send them assistance. We must save the people. I shall call upon the bishops this day for good mule teams, 12 to 15 wagons. We need 40 good young men who know how to drive teams and take charge of them. And second, 60 to 65 good spans of mules with horses, or horses with whip trees, neck yokes, stretchers, load chains. I do not want to send oxen. I want to send good horses or mules. And thirdly, 24,000 pounds of flour, which we have on hand. I will tell you all that your faith, religion, or profession of religion will save none of your souls unless you carry out just such principles as I am now teaching you. Go and bring in those people on the plains. They are doing all that they can do. And the Lord has done all that is required of him to do, and has given us power and strength to bring them in. Now, go and rescue them. Ephraim Hanks, how did you respond to such a call?
Thank you, President Young. My name is Ephraim Hanks, and I was one of the first of the rescue party members to get out to the Martin Handcart Company in 1856. It all started after a full day fishing on Utah Lake. I fell asleep early that night, and in my sleep, I heard a voice call to me, "Ephraim, the handcart companies need your help. Will you go and help them?" I got up and I looked around and I saw no one. I laid back down. 2 more times that night, I heard the same voice, "Ephraim, the handcart companies need your help. Will you go?" The 3rd time in the dark, I arose and said, "I will go," and headed out as fast as I could for Salt Lake. I hastened to Salt Lake, not knowing why, when, or where I was needed. I arrived in time to hear Brigham Young call for volunteers to leave immediately to rescue the handcart companies. When some of the brethren said they could leave in a few days, I called out and said, "I am ready to go now." The next day, I was making my way across the mountains to the east alone in a buckboard wagon with my horse. A harsh storm overtook me near South Pass, where I stopped for 3 days in the blizzard. When the snow stopped falling, it was so deep, my wagon was useless. Anxious about the handcart pioneers, I left my wagon and I started out with 2 horses. After traveling some time, I met express riders who told me a tale of the devastation and the awful plight of the handcart pioneers stuck in the snow. As I was making my bed in the snow that night, I thought how comfortable it would be to have a buffalo skin robe, and how buffalo meat might really taste good about then. Before lying down that night, I was led to ask the Lord to send me a buffalo. Now, I am a firm believer in prayer, and he has answered my prayers on many previous occasions. After praying, I looked up, and on the hill above me, 50 yards away, was a big bull buffalo. I had certainly not expected so immediately an immediate answer to my prayers. I took careful aim at the animal with my rifle, and I brought him down with 1 shot. He made a few jumps, then rolled down the hill right into my camp. I prepared strips of meat, loaded them on my horses, and traveled all the next evening. I figured that the hand of the Lord must be in this thing. It was an hour before sunset when I saw something in the distance that looked like a black streak in the snow. As I got near, I discovered it was the Martin Handcart Company. I reached the ill-fated company just as they were preparing their camp for the night and the sun was going down. The starved forms and haggard countenances of the poor sufferers moving about slowly in their camp, shivering with cold as they were preparing their scanty evening meal. This scene was enough to make the stoutest heart melt, and mine melted. When they saw me coming, They hailed me with inexpressible joy and later said that they thought I was an angel coming to help them. Upon seeing their desperate condition, I tried to speak cheering words and told them that the rescue companies were on their way. When they saw the fresh supply of buffalo meat that I had, their gratitude knew no bounds. They flocked around me begging for me, children crying, women crying. I tried to wait on them, but finally just gave up. Within 5 minutes, they had cleared my horse of all its meat. The people busily engaged in cooking and eating with thankful hearts. After they ate, I was called upon to give the sick priesthood blessings. Truly the Lord was with me as we labored together that day to ease the suffering of those poor, starving, and freezing saints. I believe I ministered to over 100 people that evening, and many of those that I ministered to rallied, took fresh courage, got up, and started forward to the west. The result of our labor gave love and honor to a merciful God. Soon more relief companies came, and as fast as we could load the wagons, we abandoned the hand carts and started west. I remained with those hand cart companies, easing their burden until they arrived in Salt Lake on November 30th, 1856. Marshall, you were there also in that rescue. Can you tell us your story about the rescue effort?
Thanks, Ephraim. I'd be happy to. My name is Marshall Franklin Allen, and I was involved in the rescue efforts for the Martin Handcart Company. But I would like to tell you of a sweet experience that I had, many years afterward. One evening I sat reminiscing over old times with my daughter, her husband, and her husband's father, whose name was George Frederick Housley. We discussed the rescue of the Martin Handcart Company, and I told the story of how Brother Brigham had called myself and a few of the other young men to gather provisions and carry to the saints who were stranded on the trail. Well, the night before departure, I knelt in prayer, and I confess I told the Lord it was a ridiculous errand to go out in such extreme weather over that country with no roads and little in the way of trails was dangerous. But as I yet prayed, it was made known to me that I should go, and that I would be the instrument in rescuing many of the company. Well, we departed the next morning. Sometime into our expedition, after many hours of searching through cold and freezing weather, many of the rescue party became discouraged, and they decided to return back to Salt Lake City, assuming that the company had been lost on the trail. I recall saying something to the effect that I would go until I reached the States, but what I would find them. As it happened, we decided to go on, and it was a good thing we did, for about noon that day, we came across a group of hand carts with many poor, starving people. Well, I decided to continue still further on, thinking there may be more scattered back along the trail, and as I went, I saw a dark spot among some rocks, and upon investigation, I found it to be a young man. I wrapped my blanket around him, administered what relief I could, and set him on my horse to take him back to the rest of the company. Well, at this point in my story, George interrupted me. Said the horse had a white leg and a star on his head, and the rest was coal black. I replied that it was, a good deal taken aback. And the blanket was a bright plaid blanket. I asked him how he could possibly know. Well, because I was the one you found, said he. George testified at that point that it was only through the faith of the saints and the prayers of his mother that he was able to survive as long as he did until I could reach him. George and his mother had emigrated from far off England, where they had joined the church and decided to heed the call, even from there, to join the saints in Zion. And they did reach the Salt Lake Valley on November 29th of 1856, on George's 20th birthday.
My name is Francis Webster. I was born on the 8th day of February, 1830 in Norfolk, England. As a young man, I had traveled to Australia and twice to the gold fields during the California gold rush. I'd earned a small fortune by selling supplies and materials to the miners who paid in gold dust. Well, at age 25, I returned to England. 5 months later, married Anne Elizabeth Parsons. Now, my wife and I were both converts to the church, and when we heard President Brigham Young's call to come to Zion, we decided to gather with the saints in America in the Great Salt Lake Valley. Anne's adoptive parents decided to join us, so we took our life savings, which was in gold dust. We took it down to the British Mint in London, where we had it stamped into gold coins. We had about $1,200, which was a sizable fortune at the time, and we knew that it would outfit us in luxury for the entire trek west. Well, when we got to Iowa City in America, Brigham Young had sent word for those who were well-to-do to help others who were too poor to afford the journey. Since I was always ready to obey the counsel of my leaders, we decided to help some of the less fortunate saints. Now, my wife was with child at the time, and we knew our baby would be born out on the plains. So we decided to cancel our order for a wagon, travel by handcart, which cost a lot less. As it turned out, that was a very prudent decision because it allowed us to outfit 9 other persons for the passage to Zion. We finally joined up with the Martin Handcart Company, which started across the plains rather late in the season on July the 28th, 1856. Now, although this trek was late in departing, we knew and were anxious to gather with the saints, so we set out full of faith. My mother-in-law, now she could have ridden in the provision wagon with her husband who was driving it, but she wanted to walk with her daughter Anne to keep her company. And later she helped carry Amy, our infant daughter, who was born out on the trail. Well, it wasn't long before we realized things were a lot more difficult than we thought. Food was scarce, and the snows came early that year. In fact, they came with a vengeance. Now, in our desperate situation, we knew Heavenly Father knew where we were, and that we had done all we could do to reach Zion. Our inspired leaders had sent rescuers to bring us into safety. But it wouldn't be easy for them to find us because we were all scattered out along the trail. And I can tell you, we thought we were goners for sure. Well, one evening, as we were just setting up camp, we saw the figure of a man riding into our camp. We thought at first it was perhaps an apparition or a mirage or even an angel. But it was a man. Ephraim Hanks, whom you heard about earlier. Well, we were all weeping with joy and gratitude, and that angel of a man, Ephraim Hanks, you see, we had walked for 4 long months and about 1,300 miles. Out of our original company of 576 souls, 147 had died. Well, many years after the handcart company rescue, an old man was sitting in the back of a Sunday school class. He was sitting there with his hands folded, and the members of the class were criticizing the leaders of the church for sending the faithful handcart pioneers out so late in the season. Now that old man listened for about as long as he could stand it. And then he stood up and he said boldly and with a voice of authority, "I ask you to stop this criticism. You're discussing a matter you know nothing about. Cold historical facts don't mean a thing because they don't give a proper interpretation of what really happened. Now, was it a mistake to send the handcart company out so late in the season? Yes. But let me tell you something. I was in that handcart company, and my wife was there too. We suffered beyond anything you could imagine, and many died of exposure and starvation. But every one of us came through that experience with the absolute knowledge that God lives, for we became acquainted with him in our extremities. Why, I have pulled my handcart when I was so weak and weary from illness and lack of food that I could hardly put one foot in front of the other. I've looked ahead and seen a patch of sand or a hill or a slope and said to myself, I can go only that far, and then I must give up because I can't pull this cart another step. And I have gone on to that patch of sand. And when I reached it, an amazing thing happened. The cart began pushing me. I've looked back many times to see who was pushing my cart, but there was no one there. I knew then that the angels of God were there. Now, was I sorry that I chose to come by handcart? No, not then, nor any minute of my life since. The price we paid to become acquainted with God was a privilege to pay. And I'm thankful that I was privileged to come in the Martin Handcart Company. That trek was one of the most ill-advised and tragic, but at the same time, the most heroic and probably the proudest single event in the Mormon pioneer experience. That page in pioneer history should be remembered for the unparalleled gallantry and heroism shown by so many people, immigrants and rescuers alike. And don't you ever forget the superb courage and strength of those incredible pioneer women. Every man will testify that they contributed enormously to the eventual survival of the Willie and Martin Handcart companies. We couldn't have done it without them. Well, when that old man sat down, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. They were all subdued, chastened, and humbled. And I reckon you probably figured out by now that the old man in the back of the class was me, Francis Webster. May you always remember, when things get tough and you have done all you can do with faith, the angels of God will be there to help push you along.
Let's make finding our pioneer ancestors the topic of our next family home evening. You know that the song All Is Well gave encouragement to the pioneers, and they found the message of hope in it. After a time, it became a theme song. It was decided in the camps that when anyone started singing it, everyone would join in. Let's sing all 4 verses of Come, Come Ye Saints, and then we'll have a closing prayer.